Hello once again, this is Hairy Nick and welcome back to the Hangar Bay, our weekly show where we talk about your submitted X-Wing lists. And we're back over to the Resistance this week, talking about the last ship on this faction that we haven't already discussed, the Resistance Transport Pod. Not that sort of big B-Wing fuselage thing that Princess Leia turned up in Episode 7, we're talking about the little pod thing that Finn and Rose escaped with in The Last Jedi. It's the little ship that sort of attaches from the larger Resistance transport, although these ships do not dock together. One very important distinction between this and most of the models in X-Wing that do actually have this kind of function. And in terms of its function in the game, it is essentially a really cheap, crappy ship with pretty average stats, but it has actually had a huge impact on the meta, mainly because of one pilot that was sort of mistakenly designed in such a way that didn't really work with the sort of core ethos of 2nd edition, in that everything was just a little bit too efficient. That has since changed. I'm talking about the pilot Finn that allowed you to take a strain token on defense and then remove the strain token before it had any effect on the way Finn is functioning. What I mean by that is Finn is able to take a strain token when he's modifying his dice on defense, and the old ruling on strain tokens is they go away after you defend. Strain tokens make you roll one less defense dice, and because that happens before the window that Finn would get a strain token, and then after he defends he gets rid of the strain token, it had no negative effect. You essentially got that part of the effect for free. And that has since changed. Now you get rid of the strain token at the same time that it has an effect on your dice, in that you go to defend, you roll one less defense die, and then you immediately remove the strain token alongside that. And apart from anything else, that ruling is just way more intuitive as a rule of the game. Look, I spoke about this at length in this video when the rules update actually happened, so click the link up there in the description if you want to see that. But for the time being, let's have a look at this ship. It has 2 red and green dice, 3 hull and a shield. Pretty average stats overall. It has a focus or a calculate in the form of one of its pilots, and a red target lock, red barrel roll, and red jam. And yeah, red jam's pretty cool. That's a nice little bit of versatility. It's something that can be very powerful in the right situation, but overall not a very efficient set of actions. Most of these are red apart from focus, and well, everything gets white focus, so who really cares about that? Also has the upgrade slots, tech, crew modification, and talents for most of its pilots. Not really a huge deal. One of the core things about this ship is it's just simply really cheap. Its cheapest buy-in is 26 points. It doesn't have a generic pilot, but 2 of the named pilots are 26 points. And because of the way these upgrades works, the talent is interesting because you can take a 1-point card like Heroic. That's fine. Tech is really awkward. Even with a pilot like BB-8 that has great use out of a card like Prime Thrusters, Prime Thrusters on BB-8 would cost 7 points, and that's almost a third of the cost of the ship, which is not really ideal. I find with most of these, we basically don't want to stack a lot of points on. Things like Heroic, especially with the pilot Finn, which we'll take a look at when we have a look at these lists, is just very good and efficient from 1 point, and some of the crew options are quite nice too. Again, things we'll have a look at when we actually get to these lists. But overall, the focus of this ship is those nice versatile pilot abilities on what is essentially a very cheap, efficient frame. It's not hard hitting, it's not powerful, but that's okay. It's very good for its points buy-in. If you would like to submit a list for us to have a look at in one of these Hangar Bay episodes, simply copy all of the text, including all pilots and upgrades, into a comment down below in one of our YouTube videos. Please also be sure to include a link to that squad within your favourite squad builder. Now, if you're unsure how to do this, simply head over to Yet Another Squad Builder 2.0. They have a fantastic squad builder built into this website. You have drop-down menus that can help you find all the upgrades and everything that's legal for the ships that you want to build with, as well as a simple text viewer that you can use to copy out all the text. And if you're part of the Patreon Discord, put all of this into the relevant list submission channel on that. Every week here, we are sure to include one patron list, so if you're part of the patron Discord, it means you have a much higher chance of being featured in one of these videos. And let's start off these lists by taking a look at this submitted on our patron Discord by Samantha, one of our newer patrons. Thank you so much for the support, Samantha. And this is Get Your Pod On with Chewbacca and every named Resistance transport pod. So apart from anything else, this is a great opportunity to have a look at all the different pilot abilities. Chewbacca has the Ray Gunner and Hull upgrade, and on these transport pods we have Heroic on Finn and C-3PO on V Maradi. The rest of them don't have any other upgrades. So this is another way of abusing Chewbacca, trying to make that pilot ability work. It's so weird and janky, but with the advent of the Resistance Transport Pack, this is something that we can sort of half seriously look at, because we do have some cheaper options for this. I was mainly looking at this with the Resistance Transport because that does have generic pilots. However, these Resistance Transport Pod named pilots are also very cheap, and yeah, they're worse in terms of their stats, but that just means they blow up faster, and that is good with Chewbacca, I suppose. And I actually quite like the way all of these pilot abilities work out together. V Maradi is a card that allows you to look at your opponent's dial. Basically, you select one of your opponent's ships at the start of the game, and then when that ship is within range 0 to 3 of V Maradi, during the system phase, you get to look at that ship's dial. It's not difficult at all to do. It's a much better version of this effect than we usually get. However, you must elect a ship at the start of the game, and you can only look at that particular ship's dial. That's the downside with this card. Although, having said that, against certain lists this is going to be great. Yeah, it's going to suck against Vulture Swarms, but who cares, because it's great against aces. And the way to capitalize off that is we have a bunch of ships that have barrel rolls, so you can do some effective blocking with that. BB-8 has an ability to do a barrel before it activates, so that means that the pilot can do a blue maneuver at that point and do an effective block and still get rid of stress and do other actions. That seems decent. The rest have red barrel rolls, but it's totally worth it if you're blocking an ace to do those red barrel rolls. Chewbacca has a red boost, so I guess he can block too if you really want to do something like that. When we're looking at the other pilots here, yes, BB-8 makes a fantastic blocker. Also, a bit of upside here is it has the calculate action, so you get a bit more value out of C-3PO. Now, I think there are much better things we can be doing with C-3PO overall. I don't think just having one BB-8 alongside him is like the best thing in the world. I think we really do want to be seeing more ships with calculate to really get value out of this card, but C-3PO is good if you're just giving a platform red coordinate and the double calculate alone, and having the BB-8 pilot gives it a bit more upside, so I do like that. I think it is worth the 6 points you're putting in for it. Rose is a no-brainer here because you get lots of rerolls on attack and defense. You're gonna get them because you have so many platforms. Enough said about that. And Finn is Finn. Heroic on Finn is basically the bare minimum that we put on this pilot, and I think overall the default build that we probably should be aiming for in terms of meta play. And before we go on and talk more about this list in the next list, we'll actually have a quick discussion about this because Finn is the pilot that's really pushing meta play right now. Arguably not so much since he was fixed, or rather the rules were fixed. But even at the time of recording this video, he's still the third most popular pilot on MetaWing, and he has put up some results since the rules changed. So I think we can expect him to go down that list a little bit, but I don't think he is as terrible as some people make him out to be. It's an interesting conversation. I still think that Finn has a great ability. I still think he is the most powerful pilot on this platform. Full stop. A lot of people are talking about Rose, but I don't think rerolls on this kind of platform is really the business we want to be talking about. Finn's ability to play around with these results, use Heroic, even combo with some cards like C-3PO if you want to go for that kind of build. I even got some submissions with Perceptive Copilot to get double focus. I don't really think that's a great idea. I think that's stacking too many points on the platform. But these are all things we can consider. And honestly, for the buy-in of 29 points, I think the pilot is still solid, and I think people are writing him off too soon. Apart from that, we have a pretty fun list here. I mean, there are a lot of guns on the table, so even if the Chewbacca combo isn't doing all of the work, it's decent. Rey is a great gunner card to have on just about any YT-1300 pilot. She is 14 points. Yeah, I know that's a bit rough. I do like Rey a little bit better when we have other ways to sort of max out those attacks. but it's decent nonetheless, and you're going to push out a lot of damage. At the end of the day, Samantha, I think if you're flying this, you have to sort of get used to the fact that you might not make that chewy extra attack work every time, but even if it only gives you the one extra bonus attack, I actually think you're doing quite well. And if you sort of cluster these together and get all your guns focusing on one of your opponent's ships at a time, I think it's actually okay, and janky combos aside, might actually be a bit of fun to take to a store tournament. So if you've had a go at it, please let me know, because it's very, very interesting. I do realise that to do this kind of thing, you do need to buy 4 of the Resistance transport, and that's not really ideal for janky lists, but whatever. It's something you can do if you really want to. Moving right along, we have Bros Before Pose by JB Fancourt. This has Nia Num, Ilo Atsi, Jessica Parva, and Finn again in the transport pod. And I think this is a bit more of a classic example of the kind of meta stuff we're seeing happen with Finn. Again, Finn just with Heroic. I think that's perfect. Don't change that. And we have these 3 T-70 X-Wing pilots. Nia Num has Heroic Integrated S-Foils, Pattern Analyzer, and Jamming Beam. Elo has Heroic Integrated S-Foils and Jamming Beam. And Jess has Integrated S-Foils and Jamming Beam. The S-Foils and Jamming Beams are free, so there are things you may as well take. Just be aware there is actually an argument not to take cards like this, just so you're not tempted to possibly make bad decisions during a game. Remember, the Jamming Beam doesn't actually do any damage, so it's often not the best choice when you're coming to attacks. However, there is no opportunity lost in taking it, so I understand why you can just put it on. And I really have no complaints about any of this. Heroic is a great upgrade, and it's on all the pilots that can take it. Pattern Analyzer on Nia Num means he just has all this absolutely ridiculous value. He can dial in red maneuvers. If he gets his pilot ability activated, that means he gets to take an action and then fire at a ship really hard or defend really well. If he misses and whiffs, he can still take an action, and there's a lot of value to be had there. I know in an ideal world you're always going to get that ability firing, but in reality that's not really the case, so I think this is absolutely fair enough. And Jess Parva, actually according to MetaWing, the most popular T-70 X-Wing pilot right now. And it makes a lot of sense. Jess Parva is almost like the reverse Boba Fett in that she gets rerolls for friendly ships being nearby, which is something that you can proactively enable. It's a very, very powerful ability and absolutely a pilot people should not be sleeping on. And for the 51 point buy-in, she really does slot into these 4 of builds quite well. Obviously, the other X-Wing pilots cost way more than 50 points, and to compensate for that, we have Finn at 30 points. You really do have to appreciate just how many opportunities you're giving yourself by taking the Resistance transport pod. Having it on the faction is really good for list building. We're seeing a lot of lists that just use sort of Finn and a bunch of A-Wings, or even just a bunch of A-Wings, but having the option to go for X-Wing pilots as well is really, really good. X-Wings in general are a bit more versatile than A-Wings, a bit more powerful, but they all seem to work well at different points cost. We have an X-Wing at 51 points and an X-Wing at 61 points. And this is even not counting like Poe Dameron builds. The platform just functions really well at these different points cost, and having a nice little efficient ship to go alongside them just makes a lot of sense and really gives the faction a lot of power. I really dig this kind of list. Thank you so much for that submission. Let us move on to this next one. We have Boosting Daredevil by J.F. Baldock. This has Zari Bengal in the RZ2 A-Wing, Temin Wexley and Kerk Hun in the T-70 X-Wing, and BB-8 in the Resistance transport pod. Zari has Daredevil, Heroic and Prime Thrusters. Temin has Daredevil, BB, Astromech, Integrated S-Foils and Jamming Beam. Kerr has BB Astromech, Afterburners, Integrated S-Foils and Jamming Beam. And BB-8 has Informant. And I wanted to talk about this list in particular because I think it's an interesting bit of list building theory where we really want to go for this kind of archetype where we sort of mirror the effect on several different ships. In the case of this list, we have very efficient boosting and even barrel rolling as well. BB-8 can take a free boost or barrel roll before he activates. Both of the X-Wings gets free barrel rolls. In the case of Kerr, he also has a free boost. Zari Bengal, being an A-Wing, also gets free boosts. And adding on Daredevil onto 2 of those platforms mean you can do right angle turns, which is nice and powerful, and you can really, really fly these things efficiently and really aggressively, more to the point. But you do have to ask yourself, is there really a good payoff for doing that kind of stuff? You can jump your opponent's ships pretty quickly, which is really, really good. And that's an interesting strategy, but you do have to bear in mind you are sort of going all in on that kind of tactic. And that can be good or bad. Good from the point of view that you can really take an opponent by surprise, but bad from the point of view that you're not really flying in a kind of versatile way. I think the key thing we have to look at here and appreciate is the fact that we have things that are really meta viable for these same points costs. And let's talk about the Resistance Transport Pod in particular, because we have what I like to call the Finn conundrum. Right now, you're flying a Resistance Transport Pod for 31 points when you could be taking Finn and Heroic for 30 points, and you've really got to justify the reason for that. And honestly, I don't think taking Informant on BB-8 is enough to justify that. I do understand what's going on here. Informant has a lot of power in this list because you're able to set up a lot of blocks. But may I suggest, if you really want to go for something like that, you could be using something like V Maradi as a way to enact that kind of thing, which, as I said before, is arguably a better version of the Informant. If you're going for Finn, yes, you are sort of weakening the overall all-in nature of your boosts and barrel rolls, but at the end of the day, that's not a terrible thing. Still having 3 out of 4 of your ships doing that kind of strategy is not a bad thing. In fact, having that extra bit of versatility, having that extra bit of power on your list is also good as well. Now, losing that Informant is a big deal. I will concede that point. But just bear in mind, Informant is the kind of card that helps you along the way to blocking, but it is not ultimately the best enabler. The best enabler for blocking your opponent's ships is the way that you fly. And the more you learn about the way your opponent flies, the better you get at calling out your opponent's maneuvers, things like Informant actually get less and less powerful. It's still very useful in this list, but I default back to that statement I was making before. You're not taking Finn, and you've really got to justify that. I'm not saying Finn is necessarily better in this list, but I think there's a conversation around that, and if you're playtesting something like this, I would absolutely try this and Finn, and be very brutal and honest in the way you compare those two archetypes. Also, with your X-Wings, yes, we have like a 61-point Temmin Wexley. We just saw that we could do things like Neon Numb with Pattern Analyzer and that kind of thing. And again, you've really got to ask yourself, is this really doing better than that? Neon Numb with Pattern Analyzer, yes, doesn't have those ultra efficient boost and barrel rolls, but he can still boost and barrel roll. He still is able to do those kinds of things a little bit less effectively, but he's also a much more versatile and powerful pilot overall when we're talking about real long-term effectiveness during a game. These are things you have to think about. I understand it's very tempting to sort of go all in on like these boosty Daredevil strategies, and it's really fun. At the end of the day, I can't say that you shouldn't fly this if really you just want to do this for fun, but I'm also keen to critique these lists from a tournament viability standpoint, and that's why I bring these points up. A very cool idea. It's a good collection of platforms. Like we saw that we could get 3 X-Wings and the Resistance Pod alongside each other. Switching out one for an A-Wing isn't the end of the world. Again, you can do like fatter builds on the A-Wings and even the X-Wings to make up those points. You could even consider like getting Poe Dameron in one of these builds. It's not out of the question. These are all things to think about. And last but not least, we have this list here by Jacob Chudzik. This has Rose in the Transport Pod this time, Ray in the Falcon, and Neon Numb in the T-70 X-Wing. Rose has Crackshot, PZ-4CO. Ray has Sense, Core Seller, Catal Connix, Finn in the gunner seat, and Ray's Millennium Falcon. Neon Numb has Crackshot, Integrated S-Foils, Pattern Analyzer, and the Black One title. We got a bit of new tech here as well. Again, we do have to address the Finn conundrum in that, yes, Rose is 33 points, the Finn build's only 30 points. However, I do actually prefer the choice in Pilot over Finn in this particular build. Rose using PZ-4CO is able to give a Ray or even Neon Numb a Calculate token or a Focus token. And that actually seems really, really decent with what those pilots are doing. It's not so good on Ray because she already has Force tokens, but if she's using things like Sense, it is really taxing her Force economy, so it's not bad passing off even Calculate tokens to that. I do dig that. And yes, we actually don't have the points to afford Finn in this list. And Rose, I think, as a solid backup option if you truly can't afford Finn, is what I would generally default to. So I do agree with that logic there. Gotta say also, I really dig this Rey build. This is a lot of fun. Cadel Connix, I've spoken about this before. It's just really dumb on the Falcon because you're able to dial in S loops and then change it to a 4 forward. If you're really stuffed up your maneuver, having the option to change between those two in particular is very powerful, and obviously anything else. Cadel Connix and change your dial to. Corcella means you're able to remove all of your stress in one go, which is really, really nice, especially alongside Rey's Millennium Falcon. I really, really dig that. You can just do all these things, keep doing S loops, blah, 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 rotate your turret, and then wipe them all away the next turn. Seems really, really decent. In terms of sense here, I don't hate it. It's handy alongside Knee and Numb. I guess that means you can use Rose on blocking. This doesn't particularly wow me in any stretch of the imagination. I would consider things like heightened perception. I think being able to attack at initiative 7 is a very powerful effect, but this is very much a medical if you're fighting against a lot of other players who use initiative 6s, especially things like Sunterfell, Sun Fac, Darth Vader, Fen Rao, all that kind of stuff. That's when this card does get a lot of value, and it is worth thinking about. It is 2 points less. It also gives you a bit of a bid, which is not irrelevant with your initiative 5s. Also, yep, Knee and Numb with Pattern Analyzer. We've gone for Crackshot here. I do like Heroic a lot, but I also understand that, yeah, Knee and Numb does fight with a lot of dice. Also, Crackshot on Rose, although it does make a bit more sense with Rose. Her rerolls do sort of make Heroic feel a bit redundant. It's already pretty corner case as it is, so I agree with that logic there. Knee and Numb, I know Heroic's not great because of all the dice he uses. In general, he wants to get into range 1, so attacking with 4 red dice. But it's still handy to have on defense. I don't know, I think I prefer it a little bit, but look, Crackshot's cool too. You can do a lot of damage with Crackshot, and Crackshot does get more powerful the better and better you fly it, so that's cool nonetheless. I really do want to see these 1 T-70 X-Wing and Falcon builds work, and I think adding the Resistance Transport Pod is a huge boost to a list like this. Look, it remains to be seen whether this kind of thing can work. It remains to be seen whether we just want to be using Finn instead of Rose. But I really do like this attempt, and I'm very curious to see how well it does. You know, I'm always a fan of using cards like Han Solo and Poe Dameron, and maybe those are better options, although they do sort of cost a little bit more, but then we can put Rey in the gunner seat. There's all kinds of conversations around this. In the comment section below, what do you all think of this kind of thing? It's very different in terms of what the Resistance is doing right now. Pretty much the Resistance is just using its small base ships and just sort of mixing them in a bowl and throwing them out. Whatever kind of combination you like seems to work these days, but these larger base ships, not so much. In any case, that's all the lists we're going to have a look at in this video. Remember to submit your list down below in the comment section if you want to be featured on one of these. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit. Please consider supporting my Patreon as well. It is really, 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 really a huge deal in terms of supporting this channel. It does seriously mean a lot. Even if you just want to do $1 a month, it is way, way better than the YouTube ad revenue. I know I go on about it at the end of every video, but it is pretty significant, and Patreon has been a huge boon pushing this channel forward, and hopefully will continue to be so. Thank you to everyone who has already supported the Patreon. You guys are absolutely free and awesome, and I'll catch you all in the next video.